Good morning. I just thought I'd just read you a little bit of something I've just been writing this morning. I'm not sure if it's going to be part of the kind of antinatalist themed novel that I'm writing right now, and which I've got about 25,000 words for so far, or not. I don't know really. I've got this idea that I might put in some stuff to do with rabbits and owls throughout it, kind of punctured through it, kind of based on this book that I've had for ages, I've talked about a couple of times, called Unworldly Wise. I might do, might not, I don't know. Anyway, the reason why I'm inspired to do it today is I was watching a video by Twit from Uranus, which was a response to a video that I made on mythical imperatives. Just this idea that, well, this kind of quest that we have, what Eugene Dechille and Andrew Newberg call the cognitive imperative, this kind of cognitive quest that we all have to make sense of the world, particularly a unified singular sense, which is kind of structured like a myth. And as I said in a previous video of my own, by that I don't mean it's untrue. It's just I'm not sure if the word true or untrue really makes any sense in that context. But we have this idea that the world and the universe will somehow kind of resolve itself into a singular idea, into a singularity of some kind, and that we have, and I think that appears both in religious thought and in scientific thought. In religious thought, it appears in things like Advaita and the union with the Godhead, that kind of stuff. In scientific thought, it appears in unification theories. And I guess it also appears in things like political thought and kind of social policy. This idea that there's a single answer to the question of what perfect society is. That kind of idea, really. So I'm just kicking that around, and I've written this, and hey, if you want to respond and tell me what you think, that would be great. It's not really well edited. I've just written it off the bat, you know what I mean. Okay. There is no duality, such is an illusion in split minds, as the owl said to the rabbit. But if the rabbit had had its wits about it, if it had been capable of that kind of unified rational thought which its competitor, the owl, was supposed to possess, then it would have easily fended off this riposte. Sadly, the rabbit did not have that singularity of brain and clarity of thought that allowed such argumentation to be waged. Instead, it was cursed with the divided brain and scattered mind of all such creatures of the earth. Lacking corpus callosum, the neural bridge across its cognitive archipelago of brain tissue, it was incapable of rounding up its thoughts into one of those all-embracing statements of absolute truth that the owl so excelled at. In fact, it had no ability to recognize or even conceptualize such a thing as the uniquely singular fact, so well bounded and pinned down under the needle-sharp eye of a single mind. To the rabbit, such things were merely myths, accidental artifacts of the architecture of the owlish brain. The brain of the owl, so said the rabbit, was an island, sovereign unto itself, and each part was connected to each other part. Its hemispheres were tightly wedded into a lockstep of cognitive motion by that bridge of tissue that the rabbit lacked, and the resultant singularity of consciousness that the owl experienced as its self gave single vision to its world. The owl did not live in the social dream that the rabbit knew as reality. It had no sense of being that was dispersed or conversational or emerging out of the drama of fragmentation. The owl's world was brightly lit by the glow of its individual and undivided mind, and its thoughts marched through the world like a column of soldiers, brooking no nonsense from the dreamers and denying the reality of the dream. The rabbit had heard the owl tell its mythic tales of an unbroken world. It had heard the one about the grand unification theory, and it had listened carefully when the owl had spoken of union with the Godhead. The words of the owl were spoken with such confidence, there was such careful placing of words, one after the other, in ordered rows, and these serried ranks of words gave such authority to the ideas they represented, that it seemed impossible to challenge them. There was a brute strength about the lines of thought, so impossibly straight, and running in such perfect parallel to one another that the message they carried seemed incontrovertible. How could these lines cross when the eye that produced them was so singular? From its lofty position on the topmost branch of the tree, the owl so obviously had a superior viewpoint, and the geometrical pattern it drew with its words mapped the world beneath with such unity of purpose that it could only be thought of as true. The map was true to the territory, and the place from which the owl had drawn that map, that undivided point of view he occupied so high above the ground, was uniquely in all the world a point of truth. Everywhere else, so the story went, was inferior to this elevated position, and every other way of being that differed from the undivided lightness of being that was experienced at the topmost branch of the high tree was fallen and inadequate. The rabbit felt itself on the ground, and felt the ground under itself. When it looked up through the branches of the tree, it could see the owl, now perching quietly, now moving its wings, now preening its feathers. From this side of the tree trunk it could see the owl's beak opening and closing with a clacking sound that echoed softly against the bluff on the other side of the river. From the other side of that tree trunk, the rabbit could see the head of the owl turning impossibly around, presumably to exercise its excoriating vision in that direction. Each glimpse that the rabbit had of the owl was a new moment, different from the others, and unconnected by the threads of unifying consciousness that made the owl's mind so unique, so unifying. For the rabbit, there was no unification of consciousness that collected these scraps of perception together under the single rubric of owl and made one entity out of the many. Moving around the base of the tree and digging in the earth underneath, he felt no urge to repair the world and make whole these scraps of sense. These were the ways of the world, and it wasn't a single way. There was no one unique and identifiable truth about that bird on the branch of that tree up there, just as there was no organized geometry to the world down here, and certainly not one that could exist in any perfect map. The owl was moments and sights and sounds and impressions, and each was interesting in its own way as any other. There was no need to line those impressions up in neat rows and give a name to this formation. Owls were not troops to be ordered into rank and file and then given a single artificially regimented name. The urge to name and be named, and for these names to be eternal and universal, so that this owl that turned its head here and now on this branch of a tree near this river would always and forever be this owl, was a product of the myth of the undivided mind. The unfortunate owl, with its sadly coherent brain and inescapably lonely sense of self, was cursed to live forever at this lofty remove from the lucky and disparate creatures on the ground beneath. The rabbit and those other fallen animals of the earth had no need of unifying myths in which all must be part of a single vision. They had no wholly damaged brain that sought to remake the worlds in their image, an image of sad perfection in which one was the only number that had any value. Unlike the owl, whose desire to make everything one and to be one with everything, the rabbit was unburdened by the myth of the one. Nothing was broken, and there was nothing to repair. Anyway, that's that. Thanks very much. Any thoughts you've got would be welcome. Bye.